Welcome back. In the last 3 lectures, I've been talking about triads, that is, 3-note chords in which the notes are stacked a third apart, such as this E major triad. There's another kind of chord in which a 4th note has been added on top of the triad, up another third. This note is a 7th above the bass note, so the chord is called a 7th chord. The chord members in a 7th chord are the same as those in a triad, namely root, third, and fifth, named by the interval above the root in root position. The 4th note, logically enough, is called the 7th of the 7th chord, because it's a 7th above the root in root position. Way back in the first few lectures, I talked about tonic and dominant harmonies. 7th chords are most common as dominant harmonies. In fact, this particular 7th chord is called a dominant 7th. More about that later. Inversion works the same way as it does in triads. The inversion of the chord is determined by the lowest note, regardless of the arrangement of the notes above it. Now that there are 4 notes, we can have 3 inversions, in addition to root position. First inversion has the third of the chord as the lowest note, second inversion has the 5th of the chord as the lowest note, and third inversion has the 7th of the chord as the lowest note. By the way, here's another term that is handy when discussing triads and 7th chords. When the notes of a chord are packed as closely together as possible, as all of these are, we say that the chord is in close position. When the notes of a chord are not packed as closely together as possible, that is, when there are gaps in the chord, we say that the chord is in open position. This chord, for example, is in open position. There are gaps on the top and bottom in which chord tones could fit. Let's work through what the root of this chord is and what the inversion is. Figuring out the roots of inverted 7th chords is trickier than figuring out the roots of triads, since there's an extra note to deal with. If you've memorized generic triads, ACE, CEG, EGB, and so on, it will speed the process. You will also learn to recognize shapes and intervals in the chord. For example, this chord has one note that is only a second away from its neighbor. That's a big clue. But let's do this the long way, starting with the bass note. Remember that the bass note of any chord is the lowest note, not necessarily the root. This is obviously not in root position, since the notes aren't arranged by thirds. Let's try every note anyway, testing for possible roots. If the bottom D were the root, the notes would be D, F, A, and C. It doesn't fit, there's a B flat. If the next note up, A flat, were the root, the notes would be A, C, E, and G. Not even close. If the next note up, B flat, were the root, the notes would be B, D, F, and A. That looks pretty good. That's what the notes are, B flat, D, F, and A flat. So B flat is the root. What inversion is it? D, the third of the chord, is the lowest note, so this is in first inversion. Here's another open position 7th chord. Let's work through the possibilities from the bottom up. If C sharp is the root, the notes would be C, E, G, and B. Not even close. If F sharp were the root, the notes would be F, A, C, and E. That fits. There's an F sharp, an A sharp, a C sharp, and an E. So this is some sort of an F 7th chord. To figure out the inversion, we look at the lowest note. It happens to be the 5th of the chord, F, A, C. So it's the 5th of the chord. So this is a second inversion, F sharp 7th chord. Here are 6 more 7th chords, this time built on the grand staff. All of them are in open position. So the very first one, let's figure it out. If the root were G, the notes would be G, B, D, and F. Not right. If the root were C sharp, the notes would be C, E, G, and B. That actually fits, right? C, sharp, E, G, and B flat. The lowest note is G, which is the 5th of the chord, so that's in second inversion. Let's look at this one. F sharp is the bass note. If it's the root, the notes would be F, A, C, and E. That doesn't fit. There's a D in there. If D is the root, the notes would be D, F, A, C. That does fit. And F sharp is the third of the chord. So the root is D, and the inversion is first inversion. Let's look at the next one. If B flat is the root, the notes would be B, D, F, A. That doesn't work because there's a G right there. If G is the root, the notes would be G, B, D, and F. Nope, there's a C in there. If E is the root, the notes would be E, G, B, and D. Nope, there's still a C in there. But if C is the root, C, E, G, B. That works. C, E, G, and B flat, and B flat is a seventh of the chord. So this is a third inversion with the root of C. Let's look at this one. If A is the root, the notes would be A, C, E, and G. In fact, that works. A, C, E, flat, and G. And A is the root, and it's in root position. Let's look at this one, but we'll use a shortcut. There's a second between the two notes in this chord. The only place a second can occur is between the seventh of the chord and the root of the chord. The seventh will be the lower note, so G is the root. And because D is the lowest note, which is the fifth of the chord, this is in second inversion. And one last chord. If D is the root, we expect D, F, A, and C. Nope, doesn't work. There's a B. If B is the root, we expect B, D, F, and A. Yes, that's what we have. We have B, D, F sharp, and A. So B is the root, and D is the third of the chord, so this is in first inversion. In this lecture, I started talking about seventh chords, which are triads with a fourth note on top, a third above the triad, or a seventh above the root. In addition to root position, seventh chords have three inversions. The first two are just like those of triads. Third inversion has the seventh of the seventh chord as the bass note. I also defined close position and open position. In close position, the notes are packed as closely together as possible. In open position, there are gaps. In the next lecture, we'll start looking at the qualities of seventh chords. Now that we have three intervals above the bass, we will have four types of diatonic seventh chords and one seventh chord that occurs when we raise the leading tone in minor.